Welcome to the Democracy's College podcast series. This podcast focuses on educational equity, justice, and excellence for all students in P20 educational pathways. This podcast is a product of the Office of Community College Research and Leadership, or OCCRL, at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Learn more about OCCRL at occrl.illinois.edu. In this episode, Marci Rockey from OCCRL talks to Leslie Daugherty, transfer coordinator at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville, about the potential of reverse transfer initiatives to address inequity in higher education.
Welcome, Leslie.
Thank you for having me.
As we know, reverse transfer is a process by which students are awarded a credential from a two-year institution through any combination of credits earned at 2- and 4-year institutions. How can implementing reverse transfer affect equity for students in higher education?
I believe reverse transfer is actually one of the easiest ways we can work towards achieving some equity in higher education. At its core, reverse transfer is a process that can ensure that students who have earned a credential are awarded that credential. I think overall, there needs to be more emphasis on credential pathways in education. A high school degree leads to an associate's degree, which can lead to a bachelor's degree, and so on. Implementing reverse transfer policies and agreements allow students some flexibility on their way to completion, even if this means that they intentionally leave or even advise to leave the community college before earning that associate's degree. But if they leave, they need to understand what that means and also have a plan. Emphasis on the word plan to complete the requirements at the 4-year transfer institution. In Illinois, we have a general education core curriculum package that was approved through the Illinois Articulation Initiative. That's a lot of words. We call this the IAIGECC. I believe that the IAIGECC was created specifically to ensure that there was, in fact, some equity in Illinois' general education core. Students who complete the package of courses and transfer to a participating institution have that institution's lower level general education, courses waived. However, at most Illinois community colleges, students have to request an audit for the package. It's not done automatically, and most students are unaware that this even exists. It also doesn't count for completion numbers at the 2-year, which has an impact on funding at the community college level. In my study, I'm going to focus on an institution which automatically awards, when met, this completion on the student's transcripts. For all students, they don't have to request an audit. When we talk about equity and reverse transfer, specifically in Illinois, where my research is, I feel that institutions that automatically award this package put their students at an advantage, both for completion of the degree and for reverse transfer. Students who transfer from institutions without this automatic awarding and don't ask or know to ask about the audit, they're just not awarded the waiver, even if they've earned it, and they may have additional courses to complete after transfer. I also think that reverse transfer initiatives help to identify some barriers to completion, barriers that institutions don't even realize exist. One of the barriers I'm really interested is looking at the additional courses required beyond the general education package at Illinois community colleges. The more research we can do to address these barriers, the more potential completers we can reach.
So, as it relates to equity and improving economic outcomes for students, what can be problematic about focusing reverse transfer initiatives solely on currently enrolled students?
Well, most of the research on reverse transfer has focused on students who are currently enrolled, which makes sense. We know who and where these students are. They're easier to contact than those who have left either the 2- or the 4-year institution. However, what the research has shown us is that institutions that are opt-in, meaning that students are asked if they're interested in reverse transfer after they are determined to be eligible. And this eligibility has usually been predetermined between the two institutions or sometimes at the state level. What the research has shown us is that students are consistently just not interested in reverse transfer. The research has hypothesized that these students believe they are on track to complete the bachelor's, so they don't see the importance of completing the associate's degree. The idea of not completing or having to stop out is something that these students really can't even fathom. However, when you look at the numbers from the National Clearinghouse Statistics, specifically they did a study between 1993 and 2013, 31 million students left higher education without a degree. And of those students, 4 million left with at least 60 credit hours, which in most cases is the requirement for an associate's degree. So if you combine that data with the information from the Georgetown Institute, they indicate that as of 2009, students with an associate's degree have a lifetime earnings that are 1/3 more of those who earn a high school degree. So it is imperative to reach out to this population. By focusing on currently enrolled students, we're helping those that may at some point stop out. And I do think that it would be great if we could get to a point where reverse transfer is automatic. But at this point, we're not doing a lot to help those students that are currently in the workforce that may be eligible for jobs if only they had that credential that they may have already technically earned.
When you think about students that do find themselves having to stop out, would you describe some of the barriers that you have found to exist that impact those students trying to re-enter higher education after stopping out?
Yeah, there can be a lot of barriers for students who are trying to come back after leaving either at the 2 or the 4 year. A lot of it depends on what has happened to the student during that stop out period. Many of these students left their institution as traditional students, as we call them, and are now coming back as sort of non-traditional learners. So they have different needs that a lot of times they're not even, sure of. They don't really understand these needs. So this is where intrusive advising is really important. Advisors can help students think about what it actually means to come back and help them anticipate what sort of help they may need personally, academically, socially, financially, just really get the student started out right. And then institutions need to be able and ready to meet these needs, whether it includes scholarships for part-time students, course availability at non-traditional times, so looking at evening, online, weekend, also looking at varied course formats, so looking at the 8-week or the 6-week and the 4-week courses, the ability to begin at different times. We see a lot of students will call and say that they're ready to go back in September, and so we're very excited for them, but they can't start until January. So looking at, different entry points as well. And it's not just offering the courses at different times, but then making sure the student services are open and available to students during these non-traditional times. Is there a place for them to eat, to study together, an online chat that's available after traditional work hours? I've worked in both admission and advising before accepting my current role. And it was always heartbreaking to talk to a student who's ready to come back mentally, but automatically hit these barriers when it came to enrollment or financial aid. And then there's some other barriers that are academic. Students only have so many years to complete most degrees before they have to move on to another academic catalog. Students also may have to redo coursework or complete new courses that were implemented after they had stopped out. I don't necessarily think this is a bad thing, but when we talk about barriers to completion, this is definitely one of them. And what the research has really consistently told us is that the sooner the student can be contacted after stop out, the better for completion, especially in regards to reverse transfer.
And are there reverse transfer initiatives that you are aware of that are successful at re-engaging or awarding credentials to students who have effectively stopped out?
This is a pretty big gap in the research. The National Student Clearinghouse has started a process to help students through reverse transfer. It's student-led. The Lumina Foundation recently completed a project called Win-Win, which had some success in awarding credentials, but it ran into a lot of the barriers similar to what we discussed earlier. They looked at students that they considered to be eligible for a degree audit. So they were chosen based on the number of credit hours they earned, where they had previously earned their credits. On average, those selected for the degree audits had about 81 earned hours. And out of that number, only about 16% were eligible for the degree. And then, then a smaller number of those actually wanted the degree. So, the report also found that there were about 20,000 students from the initial group that were close to completion. And the institutions that participated in this study were trying to re-engage those students. And only about 2,000 students from this number have returned or indicated that they want to return. So there's not a lot of data from the student perspective on that, and especially those that wanted to go back, the potential completers. There's just not a lot of data on it, whether or not they ended up completing. And this is really the only large research project we see with Stopout Population. There are some states that are looking at some initiatives, but there's really not a lot of published information, at least that I have found, on whether or not they're successful.
And given that this topic is an emerging area for scholarship and research, what do you hope to contribute to the field through your own research?
Well, right now I'm pretty early in the process, so I feel like the research could go a few different ways. I'm hoping that my research can help identify the barriers to reverse transfer, specifically for the students who have stopped out. The population that I'm looking at is what I would consider to be sort of the low-hanging fruit of stop-out reverse transfer. So these are students who have already met the IIGCC. So academically, they just need to transfer credits back to the 2-year. However, the 2-year institution I have chosen does have an additional requirement for graduation beyond the transferable course credit in the IAI. So I'm really interested to see if these additional requirements are causing a barrier, and if so, maybe this information can help the 2-year institutions look at the requirements or perhaps influence some sort of policy change at the state level. And I'm also really interested to get student perspective on reverse transfer. This is another big gap in the research. What do students think of the process? How hard is it from their perspective? Do they think it's worth the effort? Are they even interested in completion? Again, not a lot of research from the student perspective, and even less from the students who have stopped out and are not currently enrolled at any institution.
What call to action would you like to issue for practitioners at those institutions that are not currently engaged in any reverse transfer initiatives or partnerships?
I believe that reverse transfer is a win for students, but it also takes a lot of work and dedication by both the 2 and the 4-year institutions. So my call to action would be to start identifying potential barriers to completion for all students, but then specifically for those students who might qualify for reverse transfer. Are we still requiring some old graduation requirements that could be amended? I think it's important, especially in Illinois, to look at what each community college is requiring above and beyond the general education package and the minimum 60-hour requirement. Are we, in Illinois, creating our own barriers to reverse transfer? If so, let's talk about what it would take to update these requirements and make it easier for all students, not those who simply live in the right community college district, or I guess at least a community college district that's degree and graduation requirements are better suited for the reverse transfer. I also think we must educate advisors on reverse transfer and equip them with the right tools to help students. And really, let's just make reverse transfer a part of the transfer process, not just an afterthought.
Great, thank you very much.
For more information about the potential of reverse transfer initiatives to address inequity in higher education, we recommend that you visit the National Student Clearinghouse Reverse Transfer Project, Transferology, Reverse Transfer Illinois, and Credit When It's Due web pages. For more podcasts, links to today's recommended resources, or to share your comments and suggestions, visit occrl.illinois.edu/democracy or send them via Twitter at OCCRL. Tune in next month when Edmund Graham from OCCRL talks with Dr. Demetra Jackson, an associate professor for higher education at Texas Tech University, about diversity in STEM. Background music for this podcast is provided by DubLab. Thank you for listening and for your contribution to educational equity, justice, and excellence for all students.